think it's another text one. It is. This was, incidentally, the second most popular question because viewers would submit questions and then members of the public would vote. Why is marijuana illegal when alcohol and tobacco are more addictive and dangerous to our health, but we manage to control them? Wouldn't education about drugs from a younger age be better?
Well, there's one bit of that question I agree with, which I think education about drugs is vital, and we should make sure that education programs are there in our schools and we should make sure that they work. But I don't really accept the rest of the question. I think if you actually look at the sort of marijuana that is on sale today, it is actually incredibly damaging, very, very toxic, and leads to, in many cases, huge mental health problems. But I think the more fundamental reason for not making these drugs legal is that to make them legal would make them even more prevalent and would increase use levels even more than they are now. So I don't think it is the right answer. I think a combination of education and also treatment programs for drug addicts, I think those are the two most important planks of a proper anti-drug policy.
But the argument that it could be used as medicinal properties, that was another question we actually had, a person saying it's got proven medicinal properties, if used properly and regulated properly, could actually be quite helpful.
That is a matter for the science and medical authorities to determine, and they are free to make independent determinations about that. But the question here about whether illegal drugs should be made legal, my answer is no.
Okay then. I think we're moving back to some international questions now. Another video.
Hello Prime Minister, my question is this. What is the wisdom of aggressively pursuing Iran for its nuclear program, whilst Israel, which is the region's only rogue nuclear state, receives no comparable attention? And can you see how this double standard may constitute a destabilizing factor in the region?
It's a fair question, isn't it?
I'd make 2 points to Tim. First of all, we support the Non-Proliferation Treaty and we believe that everyone should fulfill their obligations under that treaty. But I would make this point about Iran, which I think does make Iran a special case. I can't think of another country, actually, anywhere in the world that has actually said it wants to obliterate one of its neighboring countries. It has said that about Israel. That seems to me to make it materially different from other countries. You know, to make that statement that it wants to wipe another country in its neighborhood off the map, and it is pursuing, to all intents and purposes, a nuclear weapon, I think makes it a special case. And that's why it's right to have the sanctions, to take a very tough approach, and to say to the Iranian government, there is another path for you. You can have civil nuclear power, you can have full engagement in the world community, but if you go down this path of nuclear weapons, you should expect to be cut off from the rest of the world, you should expect sanctions, and you should expect to be treated as a pariah.
But why should Iran have to declare that and Israel not? There's still so much ambiguity about Israel's nuclear weapons in the first place.
As I said, everyone should apply the Non-Proliferation Treaty. I think that is absolutely key. But I think there's a special case here with Iran, a country that is trying to get a nuclear weapon and that is saying that it believes in wiping another country off the map. I can't think of another country that has made that statement, and that's why I think this is a very special case. And it would lead to, if we are concerned about proliferation, it could lead to a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, which nobody wants to see.
Okay. Next question.
My question is this, Prime Minister. With the UN already having called for the US to investigate the torture that we now know for a fact to have taken place during the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions, will you act on any revelations of British involvement in torture, extraordinary rendition, or Frago 242?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, and I have already acted. There have been accusations, not that British people tortured anybody, but accusations of so-called complicity in torture. And that is why, when my government got in, we very quickly decided to settle all the outstanding cases against the British government and to deal with those, and then to set up, as I have set up, an independent inquiry by a respected judge, Justice Gibson, who's going to look into these accusations of complicity surrounding all the aspects of Guantanamo Bay, and we should act on the evidence. And I want Britain to clear any stain off its name in this area. I think that is extremely important. And it's important not just because we should be clear that torture is wrong and cannot be justified, but I also want to make sure that the security services in Britain, who do a very important job in keeping us safe, are not stuck in the courts pursuing legal actions, but are actually out there doing their work to keep us safe.
Okay, final international question, and this incidentally was the most popular question, and I think it actually ties in some of the early things we talked about the economy. If Britain is making financial cuts, why are we still fighting in Afghanistan? Shouldn't we be making Britain safe first? The argument being that if there's money to spend on wars, then why are people back home, to use this phrase, suffering from financial cuts?
Well, my argument would be that what we're doing in Afghanistan is about making Britain safe. I mean, we have to remember what Afghanistan was under the Taliban. It was a state that gave a home to Al-Qaeda and to terrorist training camps, and from those training camps came many people, including, regrettably, British citizens who went out and trained there, who have then committed atrocities and terrorist acts across the world, including in the UK. So the reason for being in Afghanistan, it's not some neo-colonial attempt to change that country. It's very pure and simple. We want an Afghanistan that is able to take control of its own security and its own safety without the need for British troops, but that does not have terrorist training camps that threaten the UK. That is our aim. It's no more than that. We want Afghanistan to be run by the Afghans for the Afghans. That is, it's as simple as that.
So to answer that question, it's worth the money. It's worth
it is, I'm afraid it is. It is obviously an expensive and difficult endeavour, and we have given a huge amount in terms of the lives of our soldiers who've been lost in Afghanistan. I'm acutely conscious of that and the extraordinary sacrifices that our armed services make every day while they are there. I don't want them to be there one day longer than is necessary, and as soon as Afghanistan is capable of taking care of its own security with its own army, its own police force, then those British soldiers will come home.
We'll keep moving, Prime Minister, because I don't want us to run out of time. I'd like to get through all the questions. We're back to domestic questions now. This one with an international flavour as well. Would you please give your countrymen the chance to vote on whether or not we stay in the European Union? As our leader, you are obliged to present our countrymen's views, give it a chance and put an end to this debate once and for all.
Well, again, I'm not sure I agree with the context of the question. I don't actually think if you hold a vote on these things, you necessarily put an end to the question once and for all. I have a very clear view, a view in which I put into my party's manifesto, which is we should be in the European Union because Britain needs to be in that group of nations. They're our most important trading partners. We need a say in the rules of the European Union, and our membership gives us that. But we want to change the European Union, and what we have done, and no British government has done this before, is we've passed an act through Parliament that says that if ever there is a treaty that passes power from Westminster to Brussels, the British people get a referendum guaranteed. That is a big change in our, if you like, way of dealing with our constitution. But I don't believe an in-out referendum is right, because I don't believe leaving the European Union would be in Britain's interests.
Okay then. Another video for you.
Hello, Mr. Cameron. We are two teenagers with plans to go to university. We want to know why only English students have to pay extortionate fees instead of all students from Wales and Scotland. We can see no logic or fairness in this and feel all students should be in this together. If only white pupils had to pay and not other ethnic groups, there would be an uproar, and we see little difference between the two scenarios. Yours sincerely, the next generation of voters.
So the argument being that there is discrimination in the education system?
What I'd say to Linz and to Taylor is that it's not discrimination, it's devolution. There is a parliament in Scotland, there is an assembly in Wales. They have decided that with the money they have, that they are not going to charge their students tuition fees. Instead, they're going to spend the money on, they're going to have to save money elsewhere. Now that is their decision. I happen to think it's not the right decision, and I think over time they will see that the reforms we're making in England will lead to stronger universities with a more secure financial base that will be able to expand and grow, and will be able to compete with universities across Europe and across the world, which is going to be absolutely vital for our industrial and economic future. But it is a decision. That was the whole point of devolution, was that different countries within the United Kingdom can make different decisions. But if you're not charging your students, you're going to have to find the money from somewhere else. And some of the universities in those countries, I think, are already starting to say, well, we're not able to make some of the investments that English universities can make because we don't charge fees. But again, that's a matter for Scotland, a matter for Wales. I think the system we put in place is right. It actually means that students only start paying back money when they earn £21,000. So what we're doing effectively is saying you've got a choice. You can either ask taxpayers to fund the expansion of university education, or you have to ask students. And we're not asking all students, we are asking only successful graduates who are earning more than £21,000 to make that payment. I think that is the right answer, but Scotland and Wales have to make their own decisions.
Okay then. Starting to run down the clock, so let's keep moving.
Immigration is one of the top issues facing today's society. It is estimated that Labour let in over 3 million. Recent newspaper articles have debated about the number of illegal immigrants that are currently claiming benefits. I don't agree with taking more out of the system than you put in. In Spain, for example, they have a system where for every year you work, You say 3 months unemployment benefit, entitling a person to 75% of their gross pay should they ever become unemployed. How do you plan to tackle the issue of immigration and the number of immigrants that are already here?
Well, what I'd say to Paul is two answers, really. First of all, we need to put proper controls on immigration, and we've said that we're going to have a cap, we're going to limit immigration. It's under Labour, it was net immigration was in the hundreds of thousands, and that's where the 3 million figure comes from. We'd like to see that figure come down from hundreds of thousands a year, net migration, to tens of thousands a year. I think that is perfectly possible and achievable, particularly if we deal with the abuses. If you look at things like the student visa system, actually if you get rid of the bogus students, the people who aren't really coming to study, I think there's still plenty of room for talented international students to come to Britain. But the second half of the answer is actually not to do with immigration, it's to do with welfare reform. One of the reasons so many people came to Britain is because we left too many of our own citizens sitting on benefits, unable to work. We are actually getting private companies and voluntary sector companies to get and help those people to get them off benefits and into work with the appropriate training. And that will reduce the demand for immigration, which I think is a very key part to making sure we have a more balanced migration policy.
Okay, Prime Minister, those are the end of our questions. However, there are 3 questions which are going to be asked to every leader which do the YouTube Worldview interviews. It's already been asked to President Barack Obama in January. It's your turn.
Okay.
First question, tell us one experience that changed the way you view the world.
It's a very,
very broad, but
there are lots of moments. I mean, I think of the Live Aid when I was relatively young, when that happened, the extraordinary pictures from Ethiopia, I think seared into all our minds the unbelievable world poverty. I suppose the experience that made me think a lot politically was the fall of the Berlin Wall. I'd spent some time behind the Iron Curtain, I'd travelled through Russia beforehand, and that, I think, that year, that incredible year of 1989, I think it was a momentous year, and I think so many people have felt that change wasn't possible, and it proved change was possible, a more bright democratic future was possible, and there are some echoes with what is happening in our world today, in our world today. So I suppose that when I'm an optimist, I always like to think on the bright side, and when I think of an experience that gave me a great lift in thinking about life and the future of our planet and the people who live on it, actually that year of liberation was an incredible year.
And I would think there are a lot of young people looking at 2011 and the same. We're only 2 months into 2011.
Let's hope that already there are some very positive signs. Of course, there are risks. There are always risks. But you know, the chance of human freedom, that feeling we all have in our breasts of wanting to be free, to be in control of our own destiny, it's a universal feeling.
This is a question I really want to hear your answer to. If you